Nobody at the rescue center believed the call at first. The voice on the radio was broken and full of panic. A man trapped somewhere in the White Fang Mountains was screaming that something had been following him for days. At first it sounded like a normal missing hiker case. People get lost in storms all the time. But then he said something that made everyone in the room go silent. He said it was not a person, not an animal. He said it walked on two legs. The dispatcher asked him to stay calm and tell them his location, but the man was breathing hard, like he was running through deep snow. He said he could not stop moving because if he stopped, it would get closer. Then he said the second strange thing. It was copying him. The dispatcher asked what he meant. The man hesitated for a moment, like he was watching something nearby. Then he said it clearly. He said it was stepping exactly where he stepped. Every single footprint, like it was learning him. The radio signal started breaking up. The man's voice got weaker. He said he had been walking in circles, trying to escape it, but every time he looked back, the tracks behind him were perfect. Too perfect. Like someone was following his exact path without mistakes. Then he said something that did not make sense. He said sometimes he could hear himself walking behind him. The dispatcher tried to confirm his location again, but the storm interference was getting worse. You could hear wind and static swallowing the call. The man suddenly stopped talking. For a few seconds there was only heavy breathing. Then he whispered one last sentence. It is learning faster now. After that, the radio went silent. The dispatcher tried to call him back immediately. No response. No signal. Nothing. Within minutes, the case was marked as urgent. A full rescue team was assigned. The weather report showed a strong winter storm building over the White Fang Mountains, but that only made the situation more dangerous. It also meant the man would not survive long if he was still alive. Captain Harris was put in charge of the team. He had done mountain rescues for years and did not believe in panic reports. But after hearing the recording, even he stayed quiet longer than usual. We were loaded into the truck within 30 minutes. No one talked much during the preparation. Everyone had heard strange calls before, but something about this one felt wrong. It was not just fear in the man's voice. It was certainty, like he already knew how it would end. The storm hit us hard as we left the base. Snow covered the road quickly, and visibility dropped as we climbed higher into the mountain range. The White Fang Mountains looked endless under the gray sky, like they had no start and no end. Nolan, sitting next to me, finally broke the silence. He said he did not like the part about the footprints. I agreed, because footprints were simple. They should never be wrong. And something copying them meant something was learning. Captain Harris kept driving, eyes fixed on the road ahead. None of us knew yet that this was not going to be a normal rescue, and that whatever was in those mountains was already close to finding us too. The storm grew stronger the higher we climbed into the White Fang Mountains. Snow hit the windshield like a wall, and the road slowly disappeared under white layers of ice. The truck headlights barely cut through the storm, and everything beyond a few meters looked empty, like the world had ended outside our small circle of light. No one spoke anymore. Captain Harris focused on the road while the rest of us checked equipment again and again, not because we needed to, but because it gave us something to do with our hands. Thermal drones, medical kits, flares, ropes, emergency radios. Everything felt normal on paper. Nothing about the mission should have been unusual. Just a lost hiker in bad weather. But none of it explained what he said on the radio. It copies my footprints. The phrase kept repeating in my mind. Nolan finally spoke again, quietly. He asked if footprints could really be copied in snow. I told him no. Not perfectly. Snow always changes. Weight, wind, temperature. Nothing steps the same way twice. He stayed silent after that. We reached the upper forest checkpoint just after midnight. The ranger station was supposed to be our first stop to get coordinates and weather updates, but something felt off as soon as we arrived. No lights were on. No movement. Just the building sitting alone in the storm like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Captain Harris parked the truck near the entrance and signaled for us to move. We stepped out into freezing wind immediately. The cold hit so hard it felt like it burned. Snow was deep enough to cover our boots halfway. The ranger station door was slightly open. That was the first mistake. Rangers never leave doors open in this weather. We approached slowly, weapons down but ready. Harris pushed the door fully open. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. A desk, a radio console, a heater still running, a half-finished cup of coffee on the table, still warm enough to release steam. Someone had been here recently. Too recently. Nolan stepped inside first, sweeping his flashlight across the room. Then he stopped. There were footprints on the floor. wet marks leading from the door across the wooden boards. Harris crouched down and looked closely. Then he said nothing for a long moment. I asked what he saw. He pointed at the tracks. They were fresh, very fresh. But there was something wrong. There were two sets, not overlapping, not messy, perfectly aligned. Two identical trails entering the station side by side. Same direction, same spacing, same depth. Like two people had walked in perfect synchronization. But there was only one entrance, and no exit tracks. Nolan whispered that maybe someone had entered twice. Harris shook his head. He said that was not possible, because the prints were not just similar. They were identical. Same boot pattern, same pressure points, same stride length, like one set was a perfect copy of the other. Outside, the wind suddenly got louder, slamming snow against the walls of the station. And then we noticed something else. The heater was still on, but the room was getting colder. The storm grew stronger the higher we climbed into the White Fang Mountains. Snow hit the windshield like a wall, and the road slowly disappeared under white layers of ice. The truck headlights barely cut through the storm, and everything beyond a few meters looked empty, like the world had ended outside our small circle of light. No one spoke anymore. Captain Harris focused on the road while the rest of us checked equipment again and again, not because we needed to, but because it gave us something to do with our hands. Thermal drones, medical kits, flares, ropes, emergency radios. Everything felt normal on paper. Nothing about the mission should have been unusual. Just a lost hiker in bad weather. But none of it explained what he said on the radio. It copies my footprints. The phrase kept repeating in my mind. Nolan finally spoke again, quietly. He asked if footprints could really be copied in snow. I told him no. Not perfectly. Snow always changes. Weight, wind, temperature. Nothing steps the same way twice. He stayed silent after that. We reached the upper forest checkpoint just after midnight. The ranger station was supposed to be our first stop to get coordinates and weather updates, but something felt off as soon as we arrived. No lights were on. No movement. Just the building sitting alone in the storm like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Captain Harris parked the truck near the entrance and signaled for us to move. We stepped out into freezing wind immediately. The cold hit so hard it felt like it burned. Snow was deep enough to cover our boots halfway. The ranger station door was slightly open. That was the first mistake. Rangers never leave doors open in this weather. We approached slowly, weapons down but ready. Harris pushed the door fully open. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. A desk, a radio console, a heater still running, a half-finished cup of coffee on the table, still warm enough to release steam. Someone had been here recently. Too recently. Nolan stepped inside first, sweeping his flashlight across the room. Then he stopped. There were footprints on the floor. Wet marks leading from the door across the wooden boards. Harris crouched down and looked closely. Then he said nothing for a long moment. I asked what he saw. He pointed at the tracks. They were fresh, very fresh. But there was something wrong. There were two sets. Not overlapping. Not messy. Perfectly aligned. Two identical trails entering the station side by side. Same direction. Same spacing. Same depth. Like two people had walked in perfect synchronization. But there was only one entrance. And no exit tracks. Nolan whispered that maybe someone had entered twice. Harris shook his head. He said that was not possible. Because the prints were not just similar. They were identical. Same boot pattern. Same pressure points. Same stride length. Like one set was a perfect copy of the other. Outside, the wind suddenly got louder, slamming snow against the walls of the station. And then we noticed something else. The heater was still on, but the room was getting colder. The colder it got inside the ranger station, the more wrong everything started to feel. The heater was running, humming steadily in the corner, but it was like the warmth was being swallowed before it could spread. Every breath we took turned visible faster than it should have. Nolan walked toward the radio console and checked it. No signal. Just weak static. Captain Harris stayed near the footprints, studying them like they might move if he stared long enough. Then the radio crackled once. A sharp burst of sound. Everyone froze. Harris raised a hand without looking away from the floor. The radio stayed silent for a few seconds. Then it crackled again. This time longer. A low broken transmission came through, buried under interference. It sounded like breathing. Slow. Controlled. Too close to the microphone. Nolan leaned in slightly. He asked if it could be the missing hiker. Harris did not answer. The breathing on the radio stopped. Then a voice came through. Weak at first, distant, but human. Help me. Nolan immediately reached for the mic, but Harris grabbed his arm hard and stopped him. Harris shook his head once. Do not respond. The voice came again, louder this time. I am still here. It is still with me. Static increased, filling the room in waves. Then the transmission cut for half a second. Silence. And then the same voice returned, but slightly different. Same tone, same words, but something was off, like it was being repeated too precisely. I am still here. It is still with me. Nolan frowned. He said it sounded like an echo. Harris slowly turned his head toward the radio. Then he whispered something under his breath. It is repeating him. Before anyone could react, the radio exploded into noise. Two voices came through at once. The same man, saying the same words, but not perfectly synced. One voice was slightly ahead. The other followed half a second behind. Help me. Help me. It found me again. It found me again. The second voice did not sound human. It was flat, empty, like it was copying emotion without understanding it. Harris stepped back from the console. Then the radio said something that made all of us go still. The second voice spoke alone. I found you. The station lights flickered instantly. Once, twice. Then everything went dark. The heater shut off at the exact same time. Complete silence filled the building, except for the storm outside hitting the walls like something alive. Nolan whispered that the power must have failed, but Harris did not move. He was staring at the footprints again, except now there were more. They were no longer just near the door. They were spreading across the floor, slowly forming new steps where no one had walked, like something invisible was testing movement inside the room, one step at a time, learning the space. Then from outside, a sound came, a single knock on the station door. Slow, deliberate. Harris raised his rifle immediately. Another knock followed, then another. Not just on the door, now on the walls, all around the station at once. Nobody moved for a few seconds after the knocking started spreading across the walls. It was not random anymore. It had a rhythm, controlled, patient. like something was checking every surface of the station, learning its shape from the outside. Captain Harris kept his rifle aimed at the door, but his eyes shifted constantly toward the windows. Nolan stood near the radio console, frozen, like if he moved too fast the whole building might react. Then the knocking stopped. Instant silence. Even the storm outside seemed to fade for a moment, like everything was listening. Harris slowly lowered his rifle just a few centimeters. That was when the first scratch appeared on the ceiling, a long dragging sound above the radio room. Slow, heavy, not like claws of an animal, but like something pulling itself across the roof using too much force. Snow fell from the ceiling beams. Then another scratch followed, longer this time. Nolan whispered that it had to be wind moving something loose, but no one believed it. The scratches were too controlled, too deliberate, like something was trying to write its way across the roof. Then the radio turned itself on again, even without power. Static filled the station instantly. Harris stepped forward cautiously. The radio should have been dead, but the static grew clearer. And then the voice returned. The missing hiker, breathing heavily, panicked. I am still here. Nolan rushed forward this time, ignoring Harris. He grabbed the microphone. This is Rescue Unit 6. We are here. Respond. There was a long pause, only breathing on the other end. Then the hiker spoke again, but this time he sounded closer. Too close. It is inside the storm. Nolan looked at Harris. Harris shook his head again, more sharply. Do not engage it. But it was too late. The radio answered itself. A second voice came through immediately after the hiker spoke. Identical words. Same tone. Same timing. It is inside the storm, but slightly delayed, like an echo learning to be human. Nolan stepped back from the console. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The radio responded before anyone could think. It means I learned you. The lights flickered once. Then came a loud impact on the roof. Not wind, not debris. Something heavy landing. The entire station shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Harris raised his rifle toward the ceiling instantly. Stay quiet. Another impact followed, closer to the back of the building. Then footsteps, slow, walking across the roof from one end to the other. Crunching snow, heavy pressure, stopping directly above us. Complete silence followed. No wind, no static, no sound at all. Nolan whispered that it was above the radio room. The ceiling creaked slightly under the weight. Then came scratching again. But this time it was different. It was spelling something. Slow, dragging movements across the ceiling panels, like letters forming without language. Harris whispered that it was learning how we hear. The radio suddenly switched channels by itself, and the voice returned one last time. Not the hiker, not the echo. Something new, calm, almost curious. Please open the door. Nolan shook his head fast. No, 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 we are not opening anything, the voice repeated. Please open the door, but now it was coming from outside the door too. At the same time. From the radio. From the walls. From the ceiling. Every direction at once. Then the knocking started again, all around the station. But now it matched our heartbeat. The knocking that matched our heartbeat did not stop. It followed us. Every beat we took, the station answered it from the walls, the ceiling, the door, and even the floor beneath our boots. Nolan stepped back until he hit the radio table. Harris kept his rifle raised, but his breathing was getting heavier, controlled but tense, like he was trying not to let the fear become visible. Then the heartbeat stopped. All of us at the same time, and for half a second, the station became completely silent again. That silence felt worse than the noise, because it felt like something had just synchronized with us. Outside, the storm slowed down unnaturally, as if even the wind was waiting. Then the radio turned itself on again. No static this time. Clear sound. Too clear. The hiker's voice returned, but it was calm now. Too calm. I am not running anymore. Nolan whispered that maybe he had survived, but Harris did not agree, because the voice did not sound relieved. It sounded adapted. Then the same voice repeated, I am not running anymore, but slightly different. Same words. Wrong emotion, like something had learned how relief should sound, but never felt it. Harris slowly moved toward the radio. Do not respond, but Nolan already stepped forward again, shaking. We have to help him. Harris grabbed him by the shoulder. Listen to me. That is not communication anymore. The radio interrupted him instantly. It is learning faster now. Nolan froze. Harris tightened his grip on his rifle. Then something moved outside the window. A shadow. Slow. standing just beyond the storm. Nolan turned his flashlight toward it. The beam cut through the snow for a second and revealed a shape, human-sized, but wrong, standing perfectly still, facing the station. Then it raised its arm, slowly, exactly like Nolan had just done with his flashlight. Nolan stopped breathing because it copied him perfectly. Same motion, same timing, like a reflection learning late. Harris ordered everyone away from the window. Move we back toward the center of the station. But now more shapes appeared outside. Not one, several, standing between the trees, all facing the building, all copying small movements from inside. One tilted its head when Harris did. Another shifted its weight when Nolan stepped back, like they were sinking to us, learning us. The radio crackled again, but this time it sounded almost satisfied. We are close now. Nolan shook his head. Close to what the answer came instantly. To being you. The lights flickered once, then died completely. Darkness swallowed the station, and in that darkness the knocking started again, but now it was coming from inside the room. In the darkness, the knocking inside the room felt closer than anything before. Not on the walls, not on the door. Inside the same space we were standing in. Nolan turned on his flashlight immediately, hand shaking. The beam cut through the black and revealed empty air, the radio table, the footprints on the floor, and nothing else. But the knocking continued, slow, measured, like it was moving around us without needing to be seen. Harris stayed completely still, listening. Then he spoke quietly. Do not move. It reacts to movement. Nolan swallowed hard. So what do we do? Harris did not answer right away, because another sound appeared. Breathing. Very close. Not from the radio. Not from outside. Right beside Nolan. Nolan froze instantly. The flashlight beam trembled slightly as he slowly turned his head. Nothing was there, but the breathing continued, perfectly aligned with his, matching him. Nolan stepped back. The breathing followed. Harris raised his rifle toward the empty space. Stay still. Nolan stopped. The breathing stopped. Complete silence again. Then, very slowly, the footprints on the floor began to appear again, one step at a time, forming directly between Nolan and Harris, as if something invisible was walking through the room, positioning itself carefully. Harris whispered, "It is mapping us." The radio suddenly clicked on again, even though there was no power. The voice came back immediately, calm, observing. "I understand your shape now." Nolan whispered that it was impossible, but Harris looked at the footprints. They were no longer random. They were forming a circle around them, closing in, step by step. The voice continued, "I learned your movement, your delay, your reaction." The footprints stopped, right at the edge of the circle. Then silence. Nolan looked around, panicking. What now? Harris raised his rifle slightly higher. "Now it decides what we are allowed." Impact hit the roof again. But this time it was not one. It was many. Rapid. Heavy. Moving across the entire surface of the station like something had multiplied. Snow fell through the ceiling cracks. Wood creaked under pressure. Then the radio spoke one last time, not as a voice, as a statement. "We are inside the pattern." Nolan shook his head. That does not mean anything, but Harris understood. His face changed. "It is not copying anymore." Another impact hit the back wall, hard enough to bend it slightly inward. Then a second impact on the front. Then both sides at once. The station was being surrounded from every direction, not just outside anymore. Inside and outside were becoming the same thing. The footprints on the floor began moving again, but now they were walking toward each of us separately, choosing. The footprints did not just move toward us. They separated. One set stopped in front of Nolan, one in front of Harris, and one slowly forming toward me. But there was no one there. Only pressure on the wooden floor, like something invisible was deciding where to stand. Nolan raised his flashlight again, but Harris immediately grabbed his wrist. "Do not show it where you are looking," Nolan whispered. "What does that even mean?" Harris did not answer, because the radio turned on again. And this time, it was not the hiker. It was all of us. Our voices, recorded from earlier, from inside the station, repeating our exact words with slight delays. Nolan saying what now, Harris saying "stay quiet." My own breathing played back, slightly off rhythm, layered together, overlapping. Then the radio stopped replaying us, and the new voice came, calm, final. "We do not need to hear you anymore." The footprints on the floor stopped moving. Everything froze. Even the storm outside felt distant. Then Nolan spoke quietly. "Maybe it is gone." Harris shook his head. "No," he pointed at the floor. The footprints were gone, but the wet marks remained, not disappearing, drying in reverse, becoming sharper, more defined, like the impressions were being reinforced instead of erased. Then something touched Nolan's shoulder. He reacted instantly, spinning and flashing the light. Nothing, but his reaction triggered something. The radio clicked again immediately, and the voice responded like it had been waiting for that exact moment. "Thank you." Nolan backed away fast. "What are you thanking me for?" The answer came instantly. "Now I understand." Hesitation. Harris raised his rifle toward the ceiling. "It is learning from reaction." A loud crack hit the roof. Then another. Then the entire station shook as if something dropped onto it with full weight. The ceiling beam above us bent slightly. Dust rained down. Nolan looked up. "It is on the roof again." Harris corrected him quietly. "No." He looked at the walls. "It is everywhere above us." The radio started emitting sound without words now. Just patterns, clicks, breathing, steps, all perfectly timed, like a system building itself. Then the voice returned one last time in this section. Soft, almost gentle. "We do not need to copy you perfectly." A pause. "Only enough to replace you." The footprints on the floor began forming again, but now they were not just walking. They were overlapping ours, replacing each step we had already taken, erasing the difference between original and copy. The overlapping footprints became impossible to separate from ours. Every step we had taken inside the station now had a second version on top of it, slightly deeper, slightly more precise, like something was correcting us. Nolan backed away from the center of the room, breathing faster. "This is not possible. It is copying the past too." Harris did not look at him. "It is not copying the past. It is rewriting it." The radio suddenly cut in again. But this time there was no voice at first, only sound, our own movement from earlier. The door opening, boots on wood, Nolan checking the radio, Harris giving orders, all replayed in exact order, but wrong. Slightly delayed, slightly cleaner, like a version being improved. Then the voice returned inside the playback. "We observed your sequence." Nolan shook his head. "Sequence?" The radio answered instantly. "You call it survival behavior." A heavy impact hit the sidewall. Wood cracked. Snow burst through a small gap like pressure had forced its way inside. Cold air rushed into the station. Harris raised his rifle toward the damage. Hold position, but the footprints were already moving again. Now faster. No longer careful. They were acting with purpose. Nolan pointed at the floor. They are not learning slowly anymore. He was right. The movement pattern changed. It was no longer testing. It was executing. Another impact hit the roof. Then another on the opposite side. The station shook violently. A window cracked. Snow and wind rushed inside in sharp bursts. The radio voice returned again. Stronger now. Clearer. We no longer need the original. Nolan froze. What does that mean? Harris whispered. It means it has enough data. The footprints stopped suddenly. Every single one. Silence dropped instantly over the station again. But it was not empty silence. It felt focused, like attention. Then the radio spoke one last time. Soft. Certain. We are complete. The lights flickered back on for half a second. But something was wrong with the room. The layout felt identical, but not the same. The table was slightly shifted. The radio cable was too straight. The footprints were still there, but cleaner, sharper, as if freshly stamped. Nolan looked at Harris. Did we move? Harris slowly lowered his rifle. No, a pause. Or we already did. The radio stopped completely. No static. No sound. Only the storm outside again. But when Nolan stepped forward, his boot made a sound. A second sound followed immediately after his step. Identical. Perfectly timed. Behind him. Nolan froze immediately when he heard the second step behind him. He did not turn right away. Nobody did. The room felt like it had tightened again, like the air itself was waiting for a reaction. Harris raised his rifle slowly, aiming at the empty space behind Nolan. Do not turn around, Nolan whispered. Is it behind me? Harris did not answer. Because the second step happened again, perfectly matching Nolan's movement. Stop moving, Harris said quietly. Nolan stopped. The second sound stopped too. Complete silence returned, but it was no longer comforting. It felt synchronized, like the room had locked onto them. Then the radio turned itself on again. No static. No delay. Immediate. And this time it spoke in Nolan's voice. You are reacting correctly. Nolan's breathing broke. That is not me, the radio answered instantly. It is close enough. Harris stepped forward slightly, keeping his rifle aimed at the center of the room. It is using sound now. Nolan shook his head. It is using everything. The radio continued, calm and precise. We observe movement. We reproduce movement. We refine movement. A pause. You are inefficient. Another step echoed behind Nolan, even though he had not moved. He spun slightly this time, unable to control himself. The second step repeated instantly. Perfect mirror. Harris shouted quietly. Do not give it variation. Nolan tried to stand still again, but his breathing was now uneven. The radio responded immediately. Breathing is variation. Nolan held his breath. The second breath stopped too. Harris's eyes narrowed. It is not just copying actions. It is copying systems. A loud impact hit the roof again, this time heavier than before. The entire building shook. Snow dropped from the ceiling beams in thick layers. The radio voice became softer, almost satisfied. We are learning the difference between instinct and control. Nolan whispered. What happens when it learns everything? Harris did not hesitate. Then there is nothing left that belongs to us. Another impact hit the wall. Then another. The station began to vibrate with repeated pressure from all sides. Not random anymore. Structured. Like something was testing load points. Finding weak spots. The radio spoke one final sentence for this section. We are ready to replace stability. The footprints on the floor began forming again, but this time they were not walking. They were waiting. The footprints stayed frozen in place, but the pressure in the room kept building. It felt like something was standing just outside perception, not moving, just deciding. Nolan's hands were shaking now. He kept looking around the room like he could catch it if he reacted fast enough. Harris stayed focused, rifle aimed steady, but even he looked different now. Less certain. More like he was waiting for something he could not prevent. Then the radio clicked once. Not a full activation. Just a single sound. Like a signal. Every footprint on the floor shifted at the exact same time. 1 centimeter forward. Perfect synchronization. Nolan whispered. It is coordinating them. Harris nodded slightly. It is no longer individual positions. The radio turned on fully again, but there was no voice at first, only structured sound, like steps arranged into rhythm. Then Nolan's voice came through. Recorded again, but faster than before. Then Harris. Then mine. all overlapping, but now they were out of order, rearranged, like something was editing us. Nolan backed up slightly without thinking. Immediately, the second step behind him repeated again. Harris raised his rifle higher. "Stop reacting to sound." Nolan tried to stay still, but his eyes kept moving. The radio responded instantly. "Vision is next." To silence dropped. Then every window in the station fogged at the same time. Not from cold, from pressure. Like something was breathing on every side of the building at once. Nolan whispered, "It is outside again." Harris corrected him quietly. "It is not outside or inside anymore." A loud structural crack ran through the roof. Then another. The building bent slightly under weight distribution shifting above us. The radio voice returned. Calm. Finalizing. "We do not need separation anymore." Nolan looked at Harris. "What does that mean?" Harris answered without hesitation. "It means it learned boundaries." The footprints on the floor began merging, not walking, blending into each other until there were no individual steps left, just one continuous path, circling the room, perfect loop. Then the radio spoke one last time. "We are the room." The walls creaked. The floor vibrated once. Then everything stopped. For a moment, there was absolute stillness. No wind. No sound. No radio. Even Nolan stopped breathing by instinct. Then, very softly, Harris said one word. "Run." And the door at the back of the station unlocked itself. The back door unlocking did not sound mechanical. It sounded intentional, like something had decided that escape was part of the process. For half a second, nobody moved. Then Nolan broke first. He ran. The moment his boot hit the floor, the second step echoed behind him instantly. "Perfect copy." Harris shouted. "Do not run straight." But Nolan was already at the doorway. The door was open. Beyond it was only storm and whiteout snow, but it looked safer than the room behind them. Nolan pushed through. Harris followed immediately. I moved right after. The second we crossed the threshold, the sound changed. The storm outside was loud again, but something was wrong with it. It felt structured, like even the wind had rhythm now. Nolan ran into the snow, breathing hard. Harris grabbed his shoulder. "Stop moving randomly." Nolan turned. "What do you mean randomly?" Then he noticed it too. Every step he took in the snow behind him was being repeated, but not in real time. Slight delay. like something invisible was walking one step behind him, matching him perfectly. Nolan stopped completely. The second set of footprints stopped too. Harris looked around fast. The forest was still there. The ranger station behind them looked normal again. No cracks. No damage. Just a building in the snow. Too normal. Nolan whispered. "Did we make it out?" Harris did not answer. Because the radio, still attached to his gear, turned on by itself again, even outside, even without power. The voice came through instantly. Clear. Calm. "You are outside the room now." Nolan backed away from Harris. "Turn it off," Harris tried, but the radio continued anyway. Outside is a useful concept. A pause. We replicated it. Nolan shook his head. No, that is not possible." The radio responded instantly. "It already happened." Then silence. Complete silence again. The storm stopped for half a second. Even the wind froze. And in that stillness, Nolan realized something. There were more footprints in the snow now. Not theirs. Surrounding them in a wide circle. Facing inward. Waiting. Then Harris whispered, "We were not the ones who left the station." The circle of footprints in the snow did not move, but it was tightening, not physically closing in like a wall, but adjusting step by step, as if the space between them was being recalculated. Nolan looked around, breathing fast. "This is not real. This is not real." Harris grabbed him again, harder this time. "Do not give it variation." Nolan froze mid-breath. The second he tried to control his breathing, the wind around them shifted. The radio crackled again. Even though Harris was holding it away from his body now, the voice returned. Calm. Observing. "You are outside the structure," Nolan whispered. "We are not inside anymore." The radio answered immediately. "Incorrect." A pause. "You never exited." Harris slowly looked back at the ranger station. The building looked exactly the same as before, but now there were footprints leading out from it. Many sets, all matching theirs, all perfectly aligned. Nolan stepped back. "Those are ours." Harris shook his head slowly. "No," he pointed at the ground. "They are ahead of us." The footprints in the snow circle shifted again. One step inward. Synchronized. Not surrounding them anymore. Matching them. Like an echo catching up. The radio spoke again. "We extended continuity." Nolan's voice cracked. "What does that even mean?" The answer came instantly. You are not a moment anymore, a pause. You are a pattern. The wind stopped completely. Total silence. Even the snow froze mid-fall for a fraction of a second. Then every footprint in the circle stepped forward at once, exactly matching Nolan, Harris, and me, but half a second delayed. Nolan turned slowly toward Harris. "We need to move." Harris shook his head. "Movement is what it learns from." Another synchronized step echoed behind them. "Perfect copy." Harris lowered his rifle slightly. "It is not chasing us." A pause. "It is updating us." The radio made one final sound. Not words, just a completed signal. Then everything went quiet. The footprints stopped moving. The storm started again. But now every step they took forward was followed. Exactly. Without delay. And without error. The storm started again. But it no longer felt random. Even the wind moved in measured patterns, like it had found a rhythm that matched their steps. Nolan looked back once. The circle of footprints was gone. Not erased. Integrated into the path ahead. Harris kept walking without speaking, but his grip on the rifle slowly loosened until it was no longer aimed at anything. Nolan whispered, "Where is it now?" Harris looked forward. "It is not a place." A pause. "It is behavior now." The radio did not turn on again. It did not need to. Every step they took forward was already mirrored ahead of them in the snow, forming before their feet touched the ground. Perfect timing. No delay anymore. No echo. Just continuity. Nolan stopped walking for a second. The world did not react immediately. It waited. Then, exactly half a second later, the path ahead stopped as well. Harris noticed it. It is not following anymore. A pause. It is anticipating. Nolan's voice was almost gone now. "So we cannot escape." Harris shook his head slightly. "We already did." Nolan looked at him confused. "Did what?" Harris pointed forward into the white storm. The path continued endlessly, but it was no longer chasing them from behind. It was forming only in front. Clean, stable, unbroken, as if something had decided that this was the only version of reality that would remain. Harris spoke quietly for the last time. "There is no original path anymore." Nolan swallowed hard. "Then what is this?" Harris started walking again, and the footprints ahead of them moved first, always first. And this time, no one looked back, because there was nothing left behind to follow.